In a world where beauty can be deadly, a rare flower may hold the key to one woman's liberation or her doom. When Amelia discovers the enchanting eclipse, she's drawn into a web of allure and terror, where neglect could unleash more than just the darkness of her nightmares. Will she learn to let go before the flower consumes her completely, or will her obsession bloom into something far more sinister? This hook sets the stage for Amelia's journey, hinting at both the allure and danger of the flower, while prompting readers to wonder about her fate. Do you like this idea, or would you prefer a different direction? Amelia had always loved flowers. From the moment she was old enough to appreciate their beauty, she found herself mesmerized by their vibrant colors, delicate petals, and sweet fragrances. Each bloom seemed to hold a story, a moment captured in time, and for Amelia, they were a refuge, an escape from the monotony of her small-town life. With every passing season, she eagerly anticipated the arrival of spring, when the world exploded into a riot of color and life, as if nature herself were painting a masterpiece. So, when she stumbled upon an old, hidden booth at the annual spring fair, her heart raced with excitement. The air was thick with the scent of cotton candy and popcorn, laughter mingling with the distant sounds of carnival rides. Yet, something about this booth beckoned to her, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. The booth was draped in faded crimson cloth, its corners tattered and worn, suggesting tales of years long past. Twisting vines, some adorned with tiny, luminescent flowers, seemed to writhe and dance in the gentle breeze, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere around the space. At the heart of the booth sat an elderly woman with piercing green eyes that seemed to glitter with wisdom and a touch of mischief. Her hair, an elegant cascade of silver, framed her weathered face, marked by time and countless smiles. She exuded an aura of mystery, inviting curiosity while commanding respect. Behind her, the single pot of flowers displayed before her demanded attention. A stunning array of blossoms that glowed with an otherworldly luminescence. Each petal appeared to shimmer, their hues shifting subtly with the light, as though they were infused with magic. Amelia felt an unexplainable pull toward the pot, her eyes wide with wonder. The flowers danced in the soft light, their colors shifting between vibrant purples, deep blues, and soft pinks, drawing her closer like a sunflower seeking the sun. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a fusion of plant and enchantment that left her breathless. She approached the counter, heart racing, and found herself captivated not just by the flowers but by the stories they seemed to whisper. I see you're enchanted," the elderly woman spoke, her voice smooth and melodic, like wind chimes in a soft breeze. "These flowers are special, my dear. They hold more than just beauty. They carry the essence of those who cherish them." Amelia blinked, intrigued. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the delicate spell woven around them. The woman's eyes sparkled with a knowing grin. "Each blossom can reveal wishes of the heart, feelings long buried, or even forgotten dreams. They grow from the memories of those who love them. Like you." Amelia's heart swelled with both excitement and fear. Could flowers truly hold such power? What dreams lay hidden deep within her? What if she were to uncover them, only to find they weren't as bright as her beloved blooms suggested? The woman waved a hand toward the pot, her fingers adorned with rings that glinted like starlight under the fair's twinkling lights. "Take one," she urged, "but remember, with every wish comes a truth. Are you ready to face what lies within?" Amelia hesitated, contemplating the world of possibilities before her, the lives she might impact, the passions she might rekindle. Taking a deep breath, she reached for a flower, feeling its cool softness under her fingertips. With that simple gesture, she understood that this booth, this old woman, and her enchanting blooms were merely the beginning of an adventure that would forever change the course of her life. The weight of her choice settled in her heart, one that could either liberate her or tether her to the past. But in that moment, beneath the twinkling sky and the buzz of the fair, she was ready to find out. The flower was unlike anything Amelia had ever seen. It nestled within a modest ceramic pot, its vibrant colors radiating an otherworldly beauty that seemed to draw the eye like a magnet. Its petals shimmered like liquid gold, capturing the light in a way that made them appear almost alive. Each petal, delicate and velvety, fluttered lightly as if whispering secrets on the breeze. A deep, intoxicating fragrance wafted from it, an enchanting blend of jasmine, honey, and something earthy she couldn't quite place. A scent that enveloped her, tugging at her memories and beckoning her closer. The label on the pot read only one word: Eclipse. It was written in elegant, swirling script that swayed with an otherworldly charm. There was a mystical quality to the name that intrigued Amelia further, hinting at secrets hidden within the flower's luminous petals. "How much for this flower?" Amelia asked, her curiosity piquing as she felt a magnetic pull towards it, the corners of her mind hinting that this was no ordinary bloom. She couldn't tear her eyes away from its hypnotic presence, as if she were witnessing a rare celestial event. The woman behind the stall leaned closer, her expression inscrutable. Her eyes, sharp and shrewd, seemed to read Amelia's thoughts. She spoke in a raspy whisper, her voice barely rising above the surrounding chatter of the bustling market. "It's not for the faint-hearted, child, but if you want it, it's yours for $13. Amelia hesitated briefly, a torrent of thoughts flooding her mind. What could be so different about this flower? Why did the woman seem almost protective over it? Yet the allure of the flower was overpowering, compelling her to act. She reluctantly reached into her pocket, feeling the crinkled notes against her fingertips. After a moment's pause, she handed over the money, a small price to pay for something so extraordinary. As the woman handed her the pot, a flicker of intensity crossed her gaze. Gripping Amelia's wrist firmly, she added with an urgency that sent a chill racing down Amelia's spine, "Remember, it thrives on attention. Do not neglect it, whatever you do." The weight of her words hung in the air, tinged with a warning that gathered in the spaces between them. Amelia nodded, her throat tightening with a mix of excitement and trepidation. There was something about the flower that felt alive, as if it held within it the power to grow or wither depending on her care. Resolute, she carefully cradled the pot in her arms and made her way home through the crowded streets. Every step felt heavy with the weight of the woman's warning, as the flower's fragrant perfume trailed behind her like an enchanting fog. Upon reaching her apartment, she placed the pot on her windowsill, where sunlight streamed in, illuminating the flower's shimmering petals even more. As she gazed at it, a whirlwind of thoughts spun in her mind. What did it mean for it to thrive on attention? Would it really respond to her care? Would there be consequences if she didn't heed the woman's cryptic warning? Drawing in a deep breath, Amelia decided she was determined to give it the love and attention it required. She resolved to nurture it, to study it, to learn from it. The flower, in its quiet majesty, seemed to pulse in response, its golden petals catching the evening light and reflecting it back into the room. Amelia felt a strange sense of connection to this remarkable bloom, enchanted by its beauty but also acutely aware of the responsibility it now represented. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey intertwined with the mysteries of eclipse. The flower transformed her small apartment, breathing life into its otherwise mundane corners. Its golden glow bathed the walls in warmth, casting soft shadows that danced playfully around the room. The radiant petals unfurled like beams of sunlight, and their intoxicating fragrance felt like a gentle embrace, oddly comforting and yet fiercely exhilarating. With every whiff, it seemed to chase away not just the physical reminders of a cluttered life but also the deeper, lingering worries that haunted her thoughts. Bills, deadlines, loneliness. Amelia found herself captivated by the flower, spending hours admiring its exquisite beauty. Each morning brought the delightful anticipation of blooming petals and vibrant colors, and she took to rearranging her furniture to get the perfect view, as if creating an art gallery around it. It became her ritual, sipping tea, reading books, or simply sitting in silence as the flower thrived under her attentive gaze. To her astonishment, it seemed to bloom brighter with each lingering look she cast at it, its vitality almost a response to her admiration. But soon, strange things began to happen, almost imperceptibly at first. The initial signs were easy to dismiss. Her cat, Misty, a finicky creature who lived by her own whims, became increasingly agitated. Day after day, she would stalk to the doorway of the room where the flower sat, her fur bristling, eyes wide with an uncharacteristic wildness. She refused to step inside, arching her back and hissing at the threshold as if an invisible barrier guarded the exquisite bloom. Amelia, with a chuckle, merely attributed this to Misty's peculiarities, thinking her cat was simply frightened of the flower's overwhelming presence. However, as days turned into weeks, she began to notice something unsettling brewing beneath the surface. Her dreams, once a peaceful escape, morphed into vivid, unsettling odysseys. Each night, as she succumbed to sleep, the world of dreams twisted into a tapestry of shadowy figures clothed in ambiguity, sibilant whispers fraying at the edges of her consciousness. They huddled around an unseen center, always in proximity to the flower, their voices a cacophony of incomprehensible messages begging her to listen. Though she tried to remember details upon waking, the images slipped away like grains of sand through her fingers, leaving only a hollow sense of dread. As a result, the mornings became more daunting. She would rise, only to find herself enveloped in a heavy fog of fatigue, as if she had spent the night running a marathon or wrestling with invisible foes. Each waking moment felt drained, entirely devoid of the energy required to face the day. Coffee brewed in her kitchen no longer offered the familiar solace it once did, and the days without the promised vibrancy of the flower felt increasingly gray and lifeless. Compelled to investigate, she began researching the peculiarities of plants, their effects on the human psyche, and legends that wrapped around them like tendrils of fog. What she discovered both fascinated and frightened her. Tales of flowers that thrived on emotions, influenced dreams, and even altered reality twisted through folklore and science alike. She wondered if perhaps the ordinary beauty of her bloom contained more than met the eye. As she read and pondered, her heart began to race with both awe and trepidation. What power lay hidden within those golden petals? And what price would she pay for the enchantment it brought into her life? The more she thought about it, the more the air in the apartment seemed to thrum with an energy that whispered, beckoning her to stay, but warning her to tread lightly. One night, while Amelia was tending to her beloved garden, she found herself engrossed in the delicate act of watering a particularly enchanting flower with golden petals. The air was still and warm, a perfect ambience for nurturing her cherished plants. But as her eyes landed on the blossoming beauty, she noticed something alarming, something that sent a shiver down her spine. The golden petals, usually a brilliant and vibrant hue, seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light of the evening. It was almost as if they were breathing, drawing in the night air in a rhythm that felt strangely alive, inviting, yet deeply unsettling. As she leaned in closer, the sweet fragrance of the flower, which had always stirred pleasant memories of sunlit days, became tinged with an unsettling undercurrent of decay. The once inviting scent now carried a faint, musty aroma, reminiscent of something long forgotten and left to rot. Amelia's heart quickened as she inhaled the odd mixture of sweetness and spoilage, a bizarre contrast that made her instinctively recoil. Feeling a wave of disturbance wash over her, Amelia made the decision to relocate the flower to the balcony. Perhaps the open air would provide it with the freshness it seemed to crave, or at least diminish the disquieting sensations that had settled around her. But as she carefully reached down to lift the pot, she was suddenly met with an excruciating sharp sting on her palm. Startled, she yelped in both surprise and pain, her heart racing. The pot slipped from her grasp, crashing to the ground in a cacophony of shattered clay and scattered soil. To her shock, a small line of blood trickled from a tiny, thorn-like wound that had appeared on her palm, an unexpected reminder of the flower's hidden dangers. As she gasped and shook her hand, trying to shake off the shock of the sting. Her gaze was drawn back to the flower. To her astonishment, it seemed to lean toward her, as if driven by a sentient desire, its petals quivering hungrily in the cool night air. The pulse of its bloom grew stronger, and she could almost imagine it breathing in sync with her own startled heartbeats. Amelia took a step back, her mind racing with confusion and dread. The once cherished flower had transformed before her eyes into something that was no longer mere decoration. It was alive in a way that felt almost predatory. A sense of foreboding settled in her stomach as she processed the alarming transformation of what she had thought was just an innocent bloom. What had she invited into her home, and what dark secrets lay hidden within the shimmering petals that now seemed to beckon her closer? With fear gripping her, she turned toward the door, suddenly desperate to escape the creeping sensation that she was no longer the caretaker of this plant, but rather its prey. That night, Amelia woke to the sound of whispers. Low, guttural, and insistent, like dark secrets shared in the dead of night. The eerie sounds seemed to echo around her room, slithering into her mind and wrapping themselves around her consciousness. Heart racing, she rolled over to check the time, desperately trying to ground herself in reality. But when she glanced at her bedside table, she was met with an unsettling sight. The flower, which she had left on the balcony just hours before, was now sitting innocuously beside her bed. Its luminescent petals glowed with an otherworldly intensity, pulsating rhythmically as if it were drawing in energy from the very air around it. With a sense of dread settling in the pit of her stomach, she stumbled backwards, her heart pounding violently against her ribcage like a caged animal desperate to escape. In her panic, she knocked over a glass of water that she hadn't even realized was there. The liquid splattered across her bedside, splashing onto the flower pot. To her shock and horror, the soil within the pot began to bubble and hiss, exuding a foul scent as though it were alive, protesting against the intrusion of the water. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, intertwining with the unsettling sounds emanating from the pot. Amelia's mind raced as she fought to regain her composure. The plant, once a symbol of beauty and tranquility, had transformed into something sinister. She knew she had to act quickly. Dread filled her as she resolved to get rid of the flower once and for all. Wrapping the pot in a thick, heavy blanket, hoping to block not only the light from its glow but also the unsettling energy it seemed to exude, she hurriedly left her home. The cool night air hit her like a wave as she hopped into her car, the whispers still echoing in her ears, urging her to stay. Driving to the edge of the dark forest, the road felt interminable, each second stretching into eternity. She felt as if unseen eyes were watching her, lurking in the shadows of the trees lining the road. When she finally parked, she could hear the crunch of twigs and leaves beneath her feet as she made her way into the dense woods. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy above, casting deep shadows that danced menacingly around her. Finding a suitable spot, she knelt and began to dig, her hands trembling with anxiety and resolve. Each shovel of earth felt like an act of defiance against whatever force had taken hold of the flower. She buried it deep, the blanket offering some protection against the soil, but unable to shield her from the icy grip of fear gripping her heart. As she packed the soil back over the pot, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was burying something more than just a plant. It was a decision weighted with finality, yet as she turned to leave, she thought she heard it. A faint, mournful wail that seemed to pierce through the heavy silence of the night. Chills raced down her spine, and she fought the urge to look back. She quickened her pace, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Each step away from that buried flower felt like a step toward freedom, but the echoes of the haunting whispers lingered in her mind, a reminder that some things were never truly gone. For a week, her life returned to normal. The oppressive dreams that had haunted her nights had finally ceased, their grip on her subconscious relinquishing as she awoke each morning refreshed and unburdened. The air in her apartment felt lighter as if the weight of unseen chains had been lifted. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the walls with a warmth that she had almost forgotten. She resumed her routines, relishing the mundane joys of daily life, grocery trips, coffee with friends, and long strolls through the city, each moment a reminder of her newfound freedom. But one fateful morning, as she sipped her coffee by the window, soaking in the tranquility of the day, her heart suddenly froze. In the distance, beyond the cityscape, on the hill where the forest began, a single golden bloom stood tall, shimmering like a beacon against the lush green backdrop. It seemed to glow faintly in the morning light, its vibrant color striking and ethereal. For a moment, she squinted, trying to convince herself that it was merely a trick of the light or a figment of her imagination. But deep down, she recognized the flower all too well. It was the same flower that had plagued her nightmares, fraught with ominous significance, and for an instant, panic surged through her veins. Terrified and desperate to escape the unseen threat, Amelia made the decision to pack her things and seek refuge in a new town, far removed from the forest, from that terrible bloom. The process felt frenetic. She tossed clothes haphazardly into her suitcase, her mind racing with thoughts of safety and security. She left behind her job, her friends, and her once-beloved apartment, convinced that distance would shield her from the darkness that had haunted her. Life in the new town was a whirlwind of change. She embraced every fresh start, desperate to fill the void left by the past. She took long hikes in the opposite direction of the forest, baked cakes for neighbors, and even picked up pottery as a new hobby. Days stretched into weeks, and the memory of the flower slowly faded from her consciousness, like an echo gradually dissipating into silence. She thought she was safe, that the malevolence had been left behind, indulging in the ordinary comforts of life. But in the months that followed, just as she began to settle into her new existence, she received a package with no return address. It arrived on an otherwise uneventful Tuesday, the kind of day that promised nothing but routine. Curiosity piqued. She carefully opened the parcel. Inside lay a small pot, the earth within it dark and rich, and nestled among the soil, unmistakably, was a familiar golden flower, its petals glimmering with a beauty so exquisite yet so threatening it made her stomach churn. Amelia's breath hitched in her throat as a wave of dread washed over her. The flower seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and her visions of safety and normalcy crumbled as the malicious origins of the bloom flooded back to her mind. It was as if someone, or something, had followed her, bridging the gap of miles to remind her of her past, to entrap her once more in its web of fear. The comforting lightness that had danced in her apartment now felt transformed into an encroaching shadow, and as her heart raced, she realized that the nightmare was far from over. She was still ensnared in the dark, cruel grip of the very thing she thought she had escaped. The accompanying note read, "It thrives on attention. Amelia, you can't escape it." Amelia's heart raced as she processed the chilling words. It was as though the note itself had been penned by the very flower that had captured her gaze. She had always thought of flowers as delicate, vibrant expressions of nature, but this one was different. Its petals, though mesmerizing, seemed to shimmer with an unsettling allure that pulled her deeper into its web of enchantment. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The flower wasn't just a plant, it was a parasite, insidious in its nature, feeding on her energy, her fear, her very essence. With every glance, she could feel it drawing her in, siphoning off bits of her spirit like a thief in the night. As she stared at the flower, unable to look away, she felt the first tendrils of its roots burrowing into her mind, twisting and curling around her thoughts. With each moment, her clarity began to fade. Memories that once brought her joy now felt tarnished and heavy, weighed down by the shadow the flower cast over her mind. She tried to shake off the feeling, to wrest free from its grasp, but each effort only seemed to strengthen its hold. It was as if the flower was coaxing out her insecurities, whispering dark affirmations that echoed in the recesses of her thoughts. Time seemed to distort as she knelt there, her surroundings fading into a hazy blur. The once vibrant colors of her garden dulled, each hue muted under the oppressive influence of the entity before her. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her back, but it did little to scatter the chill creeping along her spine. She was ensnared in a terrifying dance, where every glance at the flower was a step deeper into its clutches. Desperation clawed at her throat as she wrestled with the instinct to flee. But even as she considered escaping, the flower's beauty, its intricate patterns and hypnotic colors, held her captive, a siren song pulling her closer. She felt like a marionette, strung up on delicate threads of fascination and dread, unable to sever the ties that bound her to this creature of shadows. The insidious roots continued their invasion, unearthing her fears and doubts, feeding off the very essence of who she was. She could hear a faint whispering in the back of her mind, urging her to surrender, to give in to the delicious despair that the flower promised. The note rang true, there was no escaping this. The more attention she devoted to the flower, the stronger it grew, and the weaker she felt. Amelia knew she had to act quickly before she lost herself entirely. Summoning the last vestiges of her strength, she tore her gaze away and staggered backward, heart pounding. The flower pulsed in irritation, its colors dimming momentarily as if sensing its prey slipping from its grasp. But she could feel the pull still, a soft insistence beckoning her to return, to gaze upon its beauty once more. Determined, she turned and began to distance herself, clawing back to reality. She knew the battle was not over. The flower's roots may have burrowed deep, but she was not willing to succumb without a fight. Amelia would have to confront this creeping dread and reclaim her essence, or risk becoming nothing more than a shell, hollowed out by a relentless parasite thriving on her attention and fear. With every step she took, she vowed to resist its call, to sever its hold and return to the vibrant life that beckoned from beyond its dark petals. She was stronger than this flower, she told herself. She had to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Amelia stared in horror at the single golden bloom standing tall at the edge of the forest. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she thought she heard a faint, mournful whisper carried by the wind. Her heart pounded as she remembered the package on her doorstep, the familiar sinister flower inside. Amelia realized with chilling clarity that escaping this curse wouldn't be easy. As she stood frozen, locked in a gaze with the bloom, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her side. Looking down, she saw the tip of a golden root slithering into her skin. Darkness clouded her vision, and before she succumbed to unconsciousness, the last thing she heard was a voice, cold and ancient, whispering, "You cannot escape me, Amelia." Intrigued by Amelia's terrifying ordeal? What secrets does the sinister flower hold? And will Amelia find a way to break free from its malevolent grip? Stay tuned to find out what happens next in this gripping tale of beauty turned nightmare. Don't miss the next chapter. Discover the fate of Amelia and the dark power of the eclipse flower. Subscribe now and delve deeper into this chilling saga.